Internet, and welcome to episode number 256. Yes, 256 of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Chad, and I'm Matt. Whoops, I just deleted Chad from this. There we go. Sorry, Chad. He's Chad, I'm Matt. And
Trying to tell me something?
No, not at all. I certainly was not. With us this week is returning. He's a 5-time returnee now.
Wow.
Yes. David Pepose is back. We're gonna talk about Captain Planet, maybe a little Cable, Love, and Chrome, definitely some Space Ghost. So David, welcome.
Hi.
Speed Racer.
Speed Racer.
Thank you so much for having me. Boy, 5 times. Well, hopefully 5th time's the charm. But thank you guys so much for inviting me, for having me on the show. And I'm
Thanks
excited
for coming back
today.
Yes. Yeah. The guys that have only been on, guys and girls that have only been on one time, we always fear like
rookie numbers
around at home, and they're just like, screw those guys. And,
well, I'm excited to be a frequent flyer.
We love it, dude. Love it. We love your work, and we love chatting with you. So, when last we spoke, it was the beginning of your tenure on Space Ghost, and now you're winding down to the end of it. Number 11 just came out yesterday, I think.
Yeah.
And,
or am I?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's been a really fun book to be working on. Issue 11 just came out. It's the beginning of our Council of Doom 3-parter. And that sort of serves as the capstone of my first year on the book. It's been the response to Space Ghost has been so amazing and overwhelming in all the best ways. You work in a book like that and you don't know if it's going to catch on. You hope a book that's like Batman meets the Mandalorian might catch on, but you don't know. And so, I think for me, a book like that has been a real gift to be able to work with an artist that's as consistent as Jonathan Lau, and as talented as Jonathan Lau. This is a guy who has been in the industry even longer than I have. And I've known for many years how talented he is. And so being able to work with him is a real treat. And so, suffice to say, the response to this book has been overwhelming. The sales have been tremendous. And there might be some more stuff I can talk about a little bit down the line with that. But
Herculoids crossover.
I would love to do a Herculoids crossover. Dynamite knows it. I write your congressman. What I wouldn't do to do Space Stars. I would love to do a Space Stars revival. But Space Ghost fans I think are going to be pretty happy. More to come.
Excellent. So, do you feel like you have a better understanding of the character of who Space Ghost is at this point, almost a year into your run?
Yeah, I think he's a work in progress, which I can really relate to and empathize with. Is that he's not perfect. He's a character comprised entirely of rough edges, but he's trying. And I think that's something that I really like about him as a character. He's in a little bit of an emotional arrested development, ever since his wife and family died. And the idea that he's sort of put on this mask and taken on this persona is sort of this way of pushing his humanity down, his way of sort of like not moving on past that tragedy in the way that many other people would. And so, sometimes that manifests in like less than mature ways, which you can see in issue 11, but at the same time, I also, this idea of like a single dad arguing with his teenage daughter feels like such a trope, like that I was like, I have to do it, at some point. And so, I think ultimately the core trio of Space Ghost and Jan and Jace, that's the engine that this whole series works under. That's the emotional underpinnings that make kind of the fireworks with all the villains seem that much more high stakes. And so for me, I've really always thought of this book as, it's like the first Jurassic Park, with Tim and Lex and their dynamic with Dr. Grant, and how that sort of evolves over the course of that movie. That really is kind of the Rosetta Stone with the way that we've approached this book. And it helps that Space Ghost has such an amazingly killer rogues gallery. And, there's a lot more that we haven't even seen yet, that there's lots of cool stuff that can be done with. And so, yeah, the future is very bright for this book series.
We love it.
But yeah, it's yeah, we're gonna be pulling out the rug from under Space Ghost and those twins, and it's gonna really kind of kick off our next round of stories in a particularly interesting but still emotional kind of way.
Right. Well, that's what you hope for, right? Is you want to tear these characters to shreds, but not too much.
Not too much. I think the fact that they always come back together. I think like they're at the stage now where it is, a parent-child kind of dynamic where, sometimes they drive each other crazy, but like at the end of the day, they still love each other deeply, and they always kind of come back to that core bond and partnership. And in a way, it's sort of, Space Ghost is having that single parent experience in a way that, I think he might have romanticized, his wife and daughter a little bit. He never really got to see them grow up, and so he's sort of preserved them in his memory. And memory is very different than living, breathing people that are like being human beings right in front of you. And and Jan and Jace have some growing up to do too. I mean, they're precocious, and they're smart, and they're capable in a crisis, but also, they're orphans. And they're orphans who like live on an alien planet, and they fight bad guys, but like they don't go to school, and that's something that like we kind of wanted to give a little nod to in this week's issue of Space Ghost. And that's something that we will be paying off in the issues to come. So stay tuned. But that's going to have bigger repercussions than any of them might have thought.
Very, very awesome. Chad?
Yeah. Well, we also have you here to talk about another guy who kind of flies around and hangs out with teenagers.
that makes it sound much worse. I will say our Planeteers are firmly in their 20s in this book.
Okay.
Yes. Captain Planet in the Planeteers coming out through Dynamite this April, the same week as Earth Day. Through Dynamite, working with artist Amon Casalos. And it's been such a fun book. I've been championing Captain Planet actually for 10 years. I've pitched this book probably to every publisher in the industry. I've been laughed out of rooms trying to pitch Captain Planet, but I've always kind of carried the torch. I think it's always had all the building blocks for a blockbuster success. I think I get it that Captain Planet can sometimes be overlooked as like unsubtle or a product of its time, but when you take all that away, it's ripe for a modern retelling. It's inherently organic and diverse and multicultural with this international cast that we haven't really seen since the days of giant-sized X-Men. It's so timely. You've got the environmental, not just change, but disaster. You see it, Los Angeles, the wildfires. I lived in New York during Hurricane Sandy. My parents live in the Midwest. They had record freezing temperatures. This is a disaster movie we're all living in. And on the flip side of that, it's the human corruption and greed that fuels all of it. This sort of ceaseless drive to amass more money and power at the expense of any of the little guys on the ground level like you and me. And I think most importantly, the pop culture has caught up. I've pitched this book as X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's the story of 5 people from around the world, ordinary people like you and me, who are suddenly granted extraordinary power and find themselves on the run from a corrupt corporation that wants to exploit them to perpetuate a broken system. We've got the elemental bending. We've got the cool character archetypes. We're recontextualizing the Planeteers to plant them firmly in the year 2025. And we've redesigned Captain Planet and given him a hot dad beard. It's the only global warming I'll accept. So yeah, I think this is, like Space Ghost, a property that's been often overlooked, and those are my favorites because they don't need that much polish to make them sparkle like new. And I would much rather be underestimated because that really kind of gives us the opportunity to subvert those expectations and hopefully impress people and hopefully get them on board. But like I said, Captain Planet's been my white whale for a long time, and I couldn't be more happy and grateful and honored to be working with Amon Casalos to finally bring this story to life.
See, I'm not that familiar with Captain Planet because I think what came out in the '90s. So I was just finishing junior high, moving into high school, and kind of moved past that you know afternoon cartoon kind of
Sure.
phase for a while.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with Captain Planet, I'm glad you asked what it is it's the story of 5 people from around the world who are each given an elemental ring for the powers of earth, fire, wind, water, and heart. And when they get these rings and they use them together, they can summon an immortal elemental champion known as Captain Planet. And in so doing, they kind of give their powers to Captain Planet to kind of like as their big gun to help save the day. It's a little like the Forever People, if you're a hardcore DC fan. And for me, the thing that's so exciting about Captain Planet as a concept is there's the core motto of the book is the power is yours. And what I see that to mean is that, this is meant to be the world outside your window to a certain extent. It is focused on characters from the real world. And Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle did that by design. It was inclusive and diverse before those terms were even really mainstream. It was almost counterculture.
Seems a little woke to me, but
yeah, like they might have been called Planeteers because the term social justice warriors hadn't been invented yet. And I think it's really like it's something that we need more of. It's a concept that inherently invites empathy. And so I think for me, recontextualizing these characters really isn't that difficult. All you have to do is sort of look to the headlines. And so for me, we've actually tried to push the envelope even further with that. Back in 1990, people with disabilities, that wasn't really like seen as mainstream. LGBTQ representation certainly wasn't mainstream in 1990. And so that's something we're kind of trying to push even further with our characters. And so we have Kwame as our team leader. He's got the power of Earth. And he's a former soccer star from Ghana, who he's been sidelined after a career-ending injury that's left him disabled. And I think he's such an interesting character. He's kind of like Cyclops meets Sam from Ted Lasso. And that he's got that charm to him, but he's like kind of that quiet, reassuring nature to him. But he's also tactical. He's the one who's actually worked in a team before. And so he knows kind of how to navigate people. He knows how to call the play, so to speak. But when we meet him, he's still trying to figure out what's my future look like? I had this plan and life had other plans. And, it's sort of this idea that no matter what life throws at Kwame, he always finds a way to get back up. And I think that's such an important, kind of core character trait. We have Wheeler, who we've recontextualized him. He's an auto worker from Detroit. And I think that's really important for a book like this. And I'm sure, Chad, you might be thinking that as somebody who's not as familiar with Captain Planet, saying why the hell does this matter? Why should we care about Captain Planet as a concept, care about their mission? And so for me, I see Wheeler as he's our point of view character. His whole arc is, why does this matter? As somebody who, is an auto worker, he's got very complicated feelings about the environmental movement. And on the flip side of that is Linka, who in the original cartoon, she was the conservative Planeteer from the USSR, from the Soviet Union. Now, obviously, things changed quite a bit, even just when the original series was going on. And so for us, we're doing kind of a 180 on Linka, in that she's the most liberal of the Planeteers. She's really she's the eco activist. She headlines her own underground eco activist punk band in Russia, kind of in the vein of Pussy Riot. And so
Nice.
like I love that idea that like she's the one who believes in the mission. And she kind of, it gives some nice tension with Wheeler, who doesn't get it. She's our team scrapper. She's like Ilyana Rasputin. She's like Wolverine. She's my favorite of the bunch because I think she has surprised me in every script I've written so far. That I wrote something in the outline and then Linka shows up and just wrecks my outline and does something like super cool instead. Guy is like the heart of the team, in that she's a marine biologist from South Korea. And for me, in the original cartoon, that just meant that like Guy had like a wetsuit and like swam around with dolphins. But I think, in a lot of ways, if anybody's read my Savage Avengers run, she reminds me of the way that I wrote the Black Knight a little bit, in that it's always useful to have somebody on your team who knows science. It helps you connect dots. It helps you kind of like figure out like just from a storytelling perspective, it helps you kind of highlight things that no other character could. And so I like the idea of a scientist who's like genuinely like enthusiastic about her work. She's overexcitable. She's like, sometimes she's a little awkward, but she's like so charming and so fun. And I think a lot of people on the team underestimate her. And as we find out over the series, she's the one who understands the stakes better than anybody. She knows the science. And so for her, hope is kind of this revolutionary act. It's what are the options? It's either you stay hopeful and you fight for a better tomorrow, or you curl up into a ball and give in to despair and cynicism. And so speaking of kind of like more brooding characters, Mati is really kind of our biggest glow up of the whole series. For those who have watched the original Captain Planet, Mati was seen as kind of a punchline. He has the power of heart, and so people often were just like, oh, who's that guy? And for me, heart, it's tactical telepathy. And so Mati in our reboot is, he's an indigenous person from Brazil. People were his lands were literally people were being forced off their lands for corrupt mining interests. And so Mati was ready to stage a pretty brutal, violent pushback. And then he gets the power of heart. And it suddenly cleanses his mind of all rage and anger and violence. And it turns him into this avowed pacifist who could absolutely wreck you. He's sort of our Batman. He's like our Shang-Chi. He's very much the X Factor in our group. And he kind of cuts in and out in these very unexpected ways. But, he doesn't need to throw a punch because the ring does a lot of interesting things. It can summon animals. It can reach into your mind and make you see things that aren't there. The power of heart, the ring also houses Captain Planet's consciousness. And so it's sort of like when Captain Planet can't be summoned, at least he can kind of like sometimes chime in an important, crucial moment as some advice. And so you put these strong characters together with these strong powers and these strong personalities and these backstories that come from every different walk of life in different countries and different politics and different facets of the environmental conversation. And you put them in the same room. And suddenly sparks start flying. You see these unexpected conflicts. You see these really cool pairings, and watching these characters all bounce off one another. I haven't really had that kind of experience since Savage Avengers. And it's super fun. And I really want to shout out Amon Casalos in all this, because Amon really has brought these characters to life in such a cool and kind of profound way. If you weren't familiar with Amon's work before this, I would forgive you. He's done Pathfinder over at Dynamite. But I wasn't familiar with his work before we started working together. He's got this style that's like a little bit of Gary Frank and a little bit of Steve Dillon. And then you see little bits like Doug Monkey and Frank Whiteley in the mix. And so he's the perfect person for this book, and that he does these larger than life action sequences so beautifully. But at the same time, it's the acting. He really does the character work in such a beautiful way, that when you fall in love with these characters, it's going to be because of Amon. I mean, you can see on my Twitter feed, I posted just a panel of Linka and Wheeler on a subway train together. And like the way that Amon kind of teed that up, that dynamic and that relationship, I was like, yeah, he's the real deal. And that's something that we really kind of want, we had in our ongoing conversations of, if we're going to recontextualize the Planeteers in terms of their backstories, how do we kind of massage their look and give them a redesign that the Planeteers aren't superheroes? They don't have code names. They don't have costumes. They don't even have the matching outfits from the original cartoon. We wanted to really reinforce that these are characters that you could run into on the street. This is the world outside your window. We're trying to do a take on Captain Planet that has some of these elevated elements to it, like Captain Planet himself, and certain things like, we have villains like Duke Nukem, for example, but it still feels plausible, that it still feels immediate. It still feels like this is kind of our world, and these are ordinary people given extraordinary power. And so Amon did such a great job at making them feel like people from the year 2025. So, yeah, like I said, it's been my white whale. I'm super excited about this book, as you can tell. Yeah, I can tell you, we've got 2 issues drawn. Amon's in the middle of issue 3. It looks beautiful. Amon did an amazing job. Our colorist, Jorge Sutil, and our letterer, Jeff Eckelberry. It's really a dream team. Yeah, we're coming out with our fastball on this one.
So you talked about kind of reconceptualizing the Planeteers themselves. What about Captain Planet? How are you?
Was that like a Great Minds thing?
That was a telepathy thing.
I feel like I watched the thought jump from one screen to the other. Yes, Captain Planet is such an interesting character to me, in that first off, like, I know there's been some people, and it happens every time you do a relaunch. At least every time I've done a relaunch, everyone's like, "Are they doing a gritty Captain Planet?" And no, that couldn't be further from the truth. For me, he's very much in the vein of like a Superman or a Captain America, and that like decency is like his core superpower, and that his overall mission is that he doesn't want to see anybody die. He's like Superman if Superman had Metamorphose powers. And so the thing that I'm really excited about for Captain Planet is twofold. We're able to kind of leverage his powers in some interesting ways. Whereas the Planeteers each have one element that they get to bend, Cap has like the full suite when he's being summoned. And so he's able, he's been at this a lot longer. So he's able to pull out some tricks that the Planeteers haven't quite cracked yet. But more importantly, it's the backstory. We really wanted to lean into this idea of Captain Planet being this immortal elemental champion. And so that speaks to both his redesign and his backstory. The backstory, we're going to see some really interesting stuff, particularly in issues 2 and 3. Cap's been around for a while. He sort of pops up in different hot spots across history. And so when you see him at the eruption of Pompeii, when you see him fighting British poachers at the early 1900s in Kenya, like Cap has sort of he's popped up. And what's so interesting is he's sort of one half of a whole, in that, like I said earlier, the power is yours is the motto of this book. And so for me, that means you can't just summon a genie and wish your problems away. That's not how the world works. Cap can help, but it's ultimately in the hands of people like you and me, people on the ground. And so that's how we've recontextualized Gaia, who was sort of the den mother of the Planeteers in the original cartoon. And in the cartoon, she was this immortal demigoddess. And for me, when I work in a book like this, I want to establish limits on these characters. I want to keep them on the back foot and not give them any easy outs. And so we've recontextualized Gaia as more of a Dalai Lama figure. It's generational, that every generation there's the immortal champion and the elemental and the high priest of Earth. And she serves as this vessel of Earth's life-giving energies, which winds up putting a target on her back at the beginning of this book. And so seeing Cap with these different high priests over generations is like really interesting and cool. But also we've been able to redesign them, and Amon did such an amazing job with our redesign. Captain Planet, for those who've seen old pictures of him, you know, it's the mullet, it's the crop top. It's very much a product of 1990. And so for us, we really wanted to, the number one thing I said that we needed for this book is I wanted to give Cap some pants. You know, like just like something that can kind of like give us a bold redesign flag, you know, in the way that, you know, Absolute Batman or Ultimate Peter Parker or even Jonathan Lau's take on Space Ghost. And so we really wanted to recontextualize Cap as like a figure, an elemental being who's not made out of flesh and blood like you and me, but out of rocks and ice and snow and flame. And so Amon was the one that pitched us the dad beard. And, you know, he drew like 4 different versions of Cap, and we all immediately was like, what's with that beard? That rules. Everybody, me, our editor, Joe Ryban, everybody at Warner Brothers, we're all like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do that. And I think it kind of speaks to, I mean, not only does it make Captain Planet like a hot dad, which rules, but I think it kind of speaks to his role. He is that fatherly mentor figure, you know, that kind of is the one that when the chips are down and the Planeteers are on the back foot, Cap is there. And he's the one who's like, he's got that heroism that is timeless. It never goes out of style. And, you know, he's a guy who hasn't lost a fight since the late Cretaceous, and he has no intention of starting now. So, you know, I think he really, you know, Cap is really the anchor of the whole book. But at the same time, it has been sort of a balancing act because to me, it's the human story. The Planeteers are really the driving force of all of this. And so we never want to have it that like Cap is stealing all the spotlight or is sort of taking the agency away from these Planeteers. And so that has sort of been the way that we've kind of structured our origin story, is like finding ways to like give Cap challenges, to give him limits, to sort of find a way that like even he's the underdog in the face of all this. And so, but yeah, it's going to be really neat in the way that Amon has been drawing all of these characters. It's just been really next level.
So speaking of challenges for Captain Planet, what sort of adversaries do you have lined up?
Yeah, well, so we do have some big name Captain Planet villains that we're going to be bringing into this, starting with Lucian Plunder, who's our take on the cartoons Loot and Plunder. And we've really, it didn't take much to recontextualize them as sort of this ruthless Elon Musk billionaire. Who, you know, he all he wants to do is amass power and wealth and control, and he doesn't really care about, you know, any cost to the little guys on the ground. He's somebody who's not used to consequences at all. He's used that he can just buy his way out of them. And you know, he's an interesting character because he's got that ruthlessness, but he couches it in these very utopian kind of terms. And I think that's sort of the secret of the success of somebody like Elon Musk is, you know, he says, well, you know, I'm gonna build a rocket to Mars, and I'm gonna gut NASA while doing it. You know, or you know, these environmentally friendly cars that suddenly turn into polygon trucks that, you know, explode in front of buildings. So I think, you know, he's kind of the linchpin of the series that all of our other villains spin out of. And so we see characters like Argos Bleak, who's sort of like an Eric Prince Blackwater type. You know, he's a private mercenary who we're going to see in the opening pages of our first issue, and he's going to be a pretty big problem for the Planeteers as the series unfolds. We'll see Dr. Blight and her AI assistant Maul, who she will play a big role in a very important, crucial sequence in this storyline. Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem was an interesting challenge because he's the one villain in the original show who does have powers and does have kind of this heightened elemental, you know, kind of thing to him, that he has radioactive powers. And so the way that Amon and I have sort of circled that square has been really interesting. You know, I love Amon's redesign of the character, but it was sort of, how do we make a character like Duke Nukem work in the real world? And I think we've kind of done that in a really fun way. And we have a few other villains that we're keeping a little close to the vest for now. But suffice to say, the threats are going to escalate, and it's going to put even Cap on the back foot. But yeah, we've got, we're really balancing this out in a really fun way that there's a lot of action and excitement, but also just like a lot of heart and a lot of character work to all of it. It's a soap opera in a lot of ways. Seeing these characters, learn and kind of grow off of each other, because we're watching the Planeteers all meet for the first time, and they're not genre savvy. They don't know exactly what kind of story they've been dropped into yet, and so there's going to be some tests of some loyalty, and it's going to take there might be some mistakes made along the way before they figure out who they are as a team and what their overall mission really is.
So you mentioned that this series was your white whale. What is your history with Captain Planet, and why is it your white whale?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the 90s. I watched Captain Planet as a kid, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I kind of looked back, and I think I had done a watch of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I was so taken with that series, and remember thinking, oh man, it's a shame that came out like after Captain Planet. Like that would have been a really cool way to like kind of make Captain Planet feel even more dynamic and to really kind of give the Planeteers even more agency. And then I was like, wait, I could do that. I could be that guy. And for those reasons, but also the reasons of diversity and representation that I was talking about before, I think for me that stuff is very important for me. I grew up a Jewish kid in Missouri. I knew from a very early age I was not part of the dominant cultural group, and so for me, I think this is the thing that I admire most about our country when it does live up to those ideals. It doesn't always, but like I'm able to live in this country without feeling scared of me being persecuted for who I am. And so for me, I want that same degree of safety and rights and considerations for every other group that I'd ask for me and my family. And so I think writing books like this, that's sort of my way of putting my money where my mouth is. I think there's something, representation, it just, it builds empathy, and it just kind of shows people that they can be seen in these kinds of books. And I think that's a really core philosophy of everything I try to write, whether it's the way I frame my concepts or the properties that I find myself drawn to, is there's always room to build a bigger table, and that we can invite everybody to it. That's how our industry survives. And so getting to write a book like Captain Planet, it really does my heart good, because I feel like this is the kind of book that I hope anybody can feel seen in. That everybody feels welcome to, and to show people that you can tell like a really cool, fun story that is timely and is political, and also just is like a freaking cool action adventure story. So I really do feel like I get to have my cake and eat it too with this. And, I'm sure there's going to be people who gnash their teeth and tear their clothes over culture war nonsense. But I feel like if you read this book and you still have a reason to complain, that's on you. This book is we're talking the talk, we're walking the walk. This is every bit as good of an action superhero adventure kind of story that I've written in the same way. This is just as good as anything I've written in Space Ghost, just as good as anything I've written in Speed Racer. So that's I'm going to dare somebody not to like this book. And if they don't, it's
this is the comic book industry, so there's nobody like that.
I'm sure we'll find somebody who doesn't like it, but I'm really proud of it, and I think it's the kind of book that I didn't expect for it to be this timely. I'll be honest. I've been pitching it for 10 years. I sent in my outline. I was offered this book around San Diego Comic-Con last year, and I turned in my outline shortly before the election. I think it was the week before the election. I was greenlit the day after the election. We announced the book the day after the inauguration. In certain ways, this book feels timely in a way that I'm not always comfortable with, that makes me feel a little scared. but you can see the overwhelming response to it. People want a story like this. I think to kind of maybe feel a little hope, to maybe make a little bit of sense out of what's going on outside. For me, I see the headlines and I'm like, Lucian Blunder just threw a Sig Heil at the inauguration. I don't, sometimes the headlines I feel like are getting even further away from what I'm writing. But I feel like Captain Planet and the Planeteers, they've been overlooked for so long, but I really do think that they're the heroes of the moment. They're the heroes that can really meet today's moment. And so I'm very aware of kind of what a privilege and a responsibility it is to tell a story like that in a historical moment like this. And it's really pushing me to bring my absolute A game even beyond my enthusiasm for the concept. So, yeah, I mean, listen, it's comic books. I know we're not curing cancer here. But if we can maybe instill a little empathy, maybe we can get people to just even have a moment's hesitation to think twice and to realize that, like, you can be friends with people from all walks of life. If we can come together, we can build a better world. And then I really, truly believe from the bottom of my heart, we're stronger together than we are apart. So, yeah, that's sort of why I've been carrying the torch for a book like this for so long, and why it does my heart a lot of good that it gets to see the light of day.
Of course, there's always going to be that chud that's like, they went and made Captain Planet woke.
Yeah,
Did you say Chad?
I've seen it. I've seen that headline a couple of times already. I've seen people, say that, like, the beard, somehow makes him effeminate. I saw one person say that we gave Captain Planet a beard so it could be a stand-in for me, and that was the kindest compliment I've ever gotten.
That's actually kind of funny.
I was like, man, if only I'd take his head of hair, flames and all.
Sure.
But yeah, I feel like, I mean, media literacy is certainly dead. But I feel like, yeah, anybody who's like Captain Planet, like they turned Captain Planet woke. I'm like, yeah, the cartoon about the 5 international kids fighting billionaires to protect the environment. Like, what about that wasn't woke? It was woke before the term woke was like mainstream. And I think that's something I give so much credit to Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle for intentionally doing that. I mean, to the point where it was subversive. If you tried to launch Captain Planet as a cartoon today, they'd be burning down the TV station. Like that's why I was so genuinely surprised that somebody finally picked up the license. That Dynamite had the balls to do it. And I love them for it. I give them all the credit in the world for it. I think there's going to be people who, through a whole variety of cultural vectors and social media poisoning and, just malevolent billionaires out there, they reflexively feel like anybody who's different from them is out to get them, or they feel like anybody who's different is getting a leg up that they are not. And it ultimately sort of speaks to their own circumstances. And it's, it's the greatest grift a billionaire ever pulled, is to say, oh yeah, it's those people's fault, rather than like the people buying mega yachts. And I like I said, I hope that, listen, I'm a straight white guy, as a Jewish person, I pass, for all that's worth. And so, I'm as middle of the road of a comics guy as you could expect. And I that's why I'm daring people, like, read the book. Like, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Like, there's nothing wrong with having an international diverse cast. There's nothing wrong with inviting every possible comics fan to the table, every potential new reader. Like, it's the only way this industry is going to survive. And I think there's going to be a lot of man babies out there who get big mad about it. And there are some people who that's just the grift, like the YouTube algorithm. That's what gets them clicks. That's what gets them advertising dollars. Like, I don't know if some of these people believe half the garbage they say. Sometimes, you know, like, you know, you got to make that content, I guess. I don't condone it. Sounds like a terrible way to live your life. Feels corrosive to the human spirit to me. But yeah, you know, like, I think beyond just like the timeliness and the political messages and everything that I consider to be important about this book, it's just like a damn good story. It's fun. It's action packed. There's emotion to it. The characters rule. The art is terrific. It's a good comic. So if you don't like it because of its aspirations, politically, morally, ethically, that's on you, man.
Now, is this going to be a maxi series also?
You know, we're still hashing out exactly what the long-term runway is going to be on that. You know, we want to see what the response is going to be to this opening storyline, and we want to see kind of what my bandwidth looks like, my sanity looks like. But I would love to keep writing this. You know, we've got our first 6 already lined up, and I'm totally happy to do more. You know, we're still kind of just working on that first chunk right now. You know, or, you know, if we did a seasonal approach in the way that like Johnny Quest has, I don't know the answer to that yet. But, you know, if this winds up being all that we do, it's going to be like a really cool beginning, middle, and end. But there's, like I said, this book gets more timely by the minute, and there are certain villains that we've kept in the back pocket. Certain ones that would seem extremely, extremely timely in the year 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you know, so being as honest as I can, it's TBD. I want to finish that first origin storyline first and make sure that I don't want to do this just to do it. You know, like if I don't have like my, am I allowed to swear? If I don't have my stuff together, you know, I'd rather just like end it when I end it. But like if I can kind of, you know, if I can connect all the dots and make it work, and the scheduling works, and Amon wants to stick around, I would love to do more. It's a cool concept, and I think it's one that, frankly, I feel like needs to be told right now.
Excellent, man. I got to tell you, I was sort of on the fence about it because I have no connection to Captain Planet myself, much like Chad was saying earlier. But I think you sold me on it. So good,
yeah,
good on you.
X-Men meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like you're gonna read it and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, like I really see that DNA. That giant sized X-Men DNA is like baked hard into that book. And yeah, I just think these characters are so interesting from the different places that they come from.
Right.
So,
right.
And their different backgrounds and personalities, and the Planeteers are super fun. There's not one of them that I don't like. You know, they really are my babies in a really fun way. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for people to get to see them come to life. I think they've been overlooked and underestimated for too long. I'm excited to change that.
It's just.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
my
your voice changed.
So what can you tell us about or not Space Ghost? We've already talked about him. Speed Racer.
Yeah. Listen, if I had a nickel for every time that I was trying to write Space Ghost and wrote Speed Racer and vice versa, I would have a lot of nickels.
Fair.
Right. Speed Racer is such a fun book. I literally just turned in a script for that shortly before our podcast. That's the series that I'm starting to get to where we're in still very early stages of it. But let me tell you about Speed Racer. Talk about a fun book. That is something that has been in the works for a little while now. It kicked off at San Diego Comic-Con last year. It was a very eventful show for me, in that Chaz Pangburn, my editor at Mad Cave, he and I, we've known each other for a little while. And ever since I did The Devil That Wears My Face over at Mad Cave, which if you haven't picked it up, fun book with Alex Cormack, a horror book.
Sequel.
That would be super fun. Alex and I are already, we've got our next project slowly in the works. So stay tuned. I will hopefully be able to talk about that in the coming months.
The Devil That Wears Prada.
Yeah. But after Devil, Mad Cave has been so supportive, Mark London especially, that we've been talking about wanting to do something else together. And so Chaz has pitched various things of IP at me, and either the scheduling didn't work out or I didn't quite know it well enough to have like a good take on it. But he pulled me aside at San Diego Comic-Con and he says, listen, we've been working with Tatsunoko Productions and on Gotcha Man, and it's been really successful for all involved. And so we wanted to share. We're expanding our licensing agreement with them, and we're going to do Speed Racer. And I thought you might be a good fit for this book. Would you be interested? Let me tell you something about me. I love writing car chases. It's super fun. I did it in the first 2 volumes of Spencer and Locke. I did it a little bit in Scout's Honor. We had that opening car chase sequence. We've got the OZ. Even Devil That Wears My Face has a carriage chase. Even Moon Knight City of the Dead has like the Scarlet Scarab like top gunning through like the City of the Dead, fleeing like a flying Egyptian like funeral ship. I love chase sequences. I love car chases. And so when Chaz said 15 issues plus free comic book day, I was like, 16 issues of car chases. I'm never going to get to do that ever. Besides this book. And I think with the legacy and the cultural cachet of Speed Racer, the wheels were literally turning in my mind. And so there was a Mad Cave creator event later that night, and I cornered Chaz and I said, I've been thinking about this all day. Like, this is the kind of book you can't turn down. And so Speed Racer has been super, super fun to work on. I'm working with artist David Tinto. You might know him from Commanders in Crisis. You might know his work on Ultraman. He and I worked together on a chapter of Avengers Unlimited a few years back, and I was very taken with his work. And we reconnected at New York Comic Con shortly after I had turned in my outline to Tatsunoko. And so as we were staffing the project, I mentioned to Chaz that David might be a good fit. And so far, he's been sensational. But yeah, it's similar to my approach on Space Ghost. This is brand new continuity. So you don't have to watch the cartoons. And same thing with Captain Planet, I should add. This is brand new continuity. You don't have to watch the cartoons. All you have to do is pick up issue 1. We'll tell you everything you need to know. And we're doing it told primarily through done in 1s and done in 2s. So you're going to get a lot of a story for your money. It's going to be easy to jump in if you haven't read some of the stuff in the past. It's going to be easy to catch up. And it's Rocky in a race car. I've been drawing in from a lot of different influences, stuff like Baby Driver, a little bit of Fast and the Furious. Gran Turismo was a surprisingly helpful movie. Even a little bit of Cars. It's one of those. Speed Racer is at its heart a very timeless concept. It's the hero's journey told through a sports story. And so for us, this is showing how Speed goes from being on the wrong side of the racetrack. He's winning illegal back alley street races to joining the Formula X League and becoming a Formula X champion. What's driving him? What are the very core personal reasons he absolutely needs to win? And we're going to be digging into all of that in issue 1, which kicks off in July. We've got a really cool free comic book day story that this is my first free comic book day.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so for me, it was an interesting approach of how do we tell a story that acts as a way to build that world? What is the world of Palm City? What is the world of Formula X? And how is that different than traditional NASCAR, Formula One, what have you? How do we tell that kind of story that doesn't step on an actual issue 1? And so we've got kind of an interesting thing where we've essentially got 2 different issue 1s that if you do read our free comic book day issue, you're going to go into issue 1 being real pumped. You're going to see the Mach 5 in action. You're going to get to learn everything about this city. You're going to get to see all the important characters that we're going to be introducing over the course of this. You're going to get to meet Speed, and you're going to get to know Spritle, who's a fun character. But if you somehow miss out on it, or your shop doesn't pick up the free comic book day issue, it's okay. You can still pick up issue 1 and you will not have missed anything. We will still be able to tell you, we'll be able to introduce this world. We'll be able to introduce Formula X. We'll be able to introduce Speed and his relationships with Pops and Trixie and Rex and Spritle in really interesting and I think very contemporary ways. similar to what I've done in Space Ghost and Captain Planet. So much of it is just, what would it be like if we launched this series in the year 2025 using modern storytelling aesthetics and techniques? And I'm really, I was just telling my editor this, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I think this first issue of Speed Racer is as good of a first issue as I've ever written. I think we really have hit all the important parts of who Speed is, and getting to know what drives him emotionally and as a character, and really sets up the stakes for the whole rest of the series to come. So yeah, it's really it's a dream book. It's a challenging book. It's very technically, you have to really think very hard about the choreography of it all, and how many different ways can you make a car chase look interesting. And I think it's been a really fun book to work on. And like I said, David Tinto, I've seen his free comic book day pages. This book could not be in better hands. So yeah, I'm very excited for people to get to read this one.
Now, Mark Russell told us that he was doing a companion piece to your. Are we going to be seeing any crossover there, or are they two separate things, kind of?
So Mark will have his own separate Racer X book. So, the way we've been kind of trying to write it is that like the two can kind of weave into each other, but also like if you pick one, if you read one or the other, like you're not going to be just like lost. But yeah, Mark's got actually a backup story in our free comic book day special, drawn by Chris Batista. And I've read, Mark's actually further ahead on this series than I am. It's sort of it's been a fun but interesting sort of bit of like, oh, you're way ahead of me. You're writing stuff that's like addressing like where I'm going to be at like a few months from now. It makes me very glad that I wrote a very, very detailed outline. When I do books like this or Space Ghost, I turn in like 30-page pitches, like 30-page Bibles to be like, here's where this is on an issue-to-issue, page-to-page basis. I have the thing mapped out. And so, I think Mark's scripts are really interesting and they're really cool. And I think the biggest difference storytelling-wise is Mark is kind of taking almost like a film noir approach. You're getting into Rex's head of, with that running monologue. Whereas for me, I wanted to kind of take that step back, that sort of cinematic thing where you're not inside Speed's head in terms of the running monologue. It's visual. You see those flashbacks, but otherwise, like, it's you're sort of kept on the edge of your seat, not knowing what he's thinking, not knowing what he's going to do. So yeah, I think Mark is such a talented writer, and he's been so supportive of my work over the years. So it's really wonderful to get to work with him. And I think there's going to be some really fun stuff in store for the Racer X series. I haven't seen any art on it yet besides free comic book days. I can't speak as far as that's concerned, but I think Rex is in good hands, and you're gonna see Rex in both books. Rex, Racer X, plays a very important role in our book. I sort of see him as like Batman meets James Bond in a race car. But then also, like, if you're just like, I need extra Racer X fixes, I'm a diehard Racer X fan, you're gonna love Mark's book. So yeah, lots of fun stuff coming as far as Speed Racer is concerned. And I believe there will be even more Speed Racer related announcements to come, sort of in the vein of their work on Flash Gordon.
So with all these projects in mind, are you worried that you could become pigeonholed as guy who writes comics about cartoons from yesteryear?
It's an interesting niche that I wasn't expecting, but I think the way that it all kind of came into being is, I've been writing Space Ghost, and I love the freedom of a book like that. And I think the thing that has really been most exciting to me is people have stopped treating that as like a nostalgia book. Now they're just like, oh, this is like just a badass superhero book, and that's exactly what I was hoping for with the book like that. And it's funny because Speed Racer materialized in such a way that I was like, oh, it's a sports book at the end of the day. In an industry that isn't always the friendliest towards those. I feel like the Speed Racer name is what helps sell a book like that. And then Captain Planet kind of happened in such a way that I was like, I'm going to be so mad if somebody else writes that book. I will like, it was one of those, there were some tricky months in terms of juggling my workload. I was just wrapping up on my Cable miniseries and still keeping up on Space Ghost while developing these two books, consecutively. But I was like, I'm going to be mad forever if somebody writes Captain Planet. If somebody else is out there doing the press circuit for Captain Planet and it's not me, I'm going to be like big, salty mad about it for the rest of my career. So, I think some of it is you take the assignments that speak to you, and these happen to be the ones that do. But I think for me, I'm always trying to just kind of do different things. I always want to have like as diverse like a portfolio, I guess, as possible. And maybe this is the wrong way to look at it, but for me, I always think about it at the end of the day as what's on my convention table. I'm at a show and somebody comes over and maybe they're not a diehard comics fan. Maybe they're not a Wednesday Warrior. Maybe they see a cover and they're interested. I want to be the Baskin Robbins of comics. I want to be the guy with the what is it? The 37 flavors or is it the 52 flavors? Am I confusing it with ketchup?
35. Yes,
35.
I think it's 35. I don't know.
35? I thought it was 31.
I don't know. It's been so long since I've been to a Baskin Robbins.
Flavors. You got it. I would like to have a flavor for everyone, is what I'm trying to say. And so, for me, it's checking off the food groups. It's like every time I finish a book, every time I start a book, I'm like, can I check off something in my to-do list? Whether it's something like a car chase book, like Speed Racer, whether it's like, an international team of like budding heroes, like Captain Planet, a found family story told through us, a space opera superhero lens, like Space Ghost, a time travel doomed romance in Cable Love and Chrome. Every book you write, you check something off, or if you're lucky, you check a few things off. And the problem is that every time you finish a book, you might have checked a few things off your to-do list, but you've added a bunch more stuff. Because just as somebody who like consumes pop culture, you're like, oh man, I just watched something that had a body swap thing, and that turns into the devil that wears my face. Like you see people do cool stuff with pop culture. Like I'm gonna go see that movie Novocaine tonight. I'm sure I'm gonna walk out of that movie super jealous of the idea of somebody who can't feel pain. And boy, if I don't, I'm sure I'm going to try to write something about a guy who can't feel pain in the coming years because I'm so mad and jealous that that's such a clever thing. So, anyway, it's a long way of saying like I'm always trying to do new things. Like I don't know if I'll do like another cartoon after this run unless there's something that really speaks to me. Like I don't know, maybe Voltron or something. Or listen, if somebody offered me anything with the Ninja Turtles, I would be there. Like you'd see like a Pepose shaped cloud. But I think you could go crazy trying to anticipate where this industry is headed. And I think the thing that I've always learned, and you see it with Space Ghost, and you see it with Speed Racer, you see it with Savage Avengers and City, and those in particular. I didn't ask for those books. Those books were sort of like they were offered to me unexpectedly, and those wound up being some of the most fun books of my career. It's not to say you can't steer yourself on occasion. City of the Dead was me asking Tom Brevoort, saying, I really want to write something with Moon Knight. Let me know. Captain Planet, obviously, I was beating down Dynamite's door to write that book. But I think by and large, it's been in my experience, and I imagine will remain in my experience for a while. Publishers, they've got needs. They know the needs more than I will know the needs. And so, all I can do is just kind of continue to try to put out my best work, the work that I think speaks most of my skills and my sensibilities, and are the best calling cards for me and my portfolio for more work down the line. And just keep knocking on doors. But I do consider myself really fortunate to be able to write these books. I don't consider them anything lesser than, superhero work at the big two or creator-owned work elsewhere. And, I'm fortunate enough to be doing all three. But I think these books, they speak to a core value of mine, which is I like being underestimated. I like being able to subvert those expectations and take a property that you might not think much of and prove to you why it's withstood the test of time. And so I think books like this, like the suite that I've got right now, they've kept me very busy, and they've been really creatively satisfying. And I think they do represent some of my best work. So I'm very excited for people to get to see all of that and watch me put my money where my mouth is.
Well, as a fan and just as a reader in general, I say let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes. So to clarify, we've got Captain Planet in April.
Yeah, April 23rd, the day after Earth Day.
Okay, and then we've got Speed Racer coming in July. Is that with a free comic book day preview?
So we'll have our free comic book day story. This is a full storyline. It's an 18-page standalone story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. So it stands on its own. But yeah, that'll kick off on free comic book day. Actually, the weekend after Captain Planet comes out. And then we are kicking off. The series itself begins, I believe, the end of July.
Awesome. Love it. Love to hear it. Love having you as a guest, David. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. No, thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you for everyone watching. Please tell your local comic shop to add the books to your pull list. In case you need to keep score, it's Space Ghost, Captain Planet, Speed Racer, and Cable Love and Chrome. I know it's a lot of books, but it keeps my puppy Ruby fed and kibble. And stay tuned because I know that it is a lot of licensed work and big two work, but I have not forgotten about my creator-owned roots, and I will have more to share about my next creator-owned project very, very, very soon.
Awesome. Well, on that note,
for visit 6.
Yes, for the 6th visit.
6th visit. That's right. On that note, Chad, who are we going to be visiting with next week?
Indie creator Steve Urena. He's running a Kickstarter for a Zombie Date Night 2.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to you all listening to it. Until then, he's Chad. I'm Matt. It's the Comic Watchers, and this is our show. Get out there, folks. The world might be a tough place, especially right now. Just try to do some good in the world. Get out there. Support your local comic store. Read something awesome. Support local art, local music. Just don't be a dick. Thank you so much. And until next time, we'll see you. Be well.